Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Blast Radius. This is normally the part of the program where I regale you with a fun, pithy comedy news roundup, but it would seem rather wildly inappropriate to be doing a fun, pithy comedy news roundup tonight in light of the events of yesterday evening in Butler County, Pennsylvania. There will be none among you who are as yet unaware that Donald Trump was shot and wounded in a failed assassination attempt that claimed the life of retired Fire Chief Corey Comparator and wounded two others. There will also, I trust, be none among you who has not rolled your eyes and palmed your face at the subsequent antics of our friends in the fake news performance artist community who, lacking any capacity for introspection or self-awareness right to the very end, are quick to attribute the evil deed to a culmination of a toxically overheated political climate, and yet strangely unprepared to acknowledge, much less apologize for, their own outsized role in creating, maintaining, and escalating those same climatic conditions. Are there plenty of recriminations and remonstrances that ought to be thrown around tonight? You bet your sweet ass there are. And we will throw around every last one of them in the upcoming 90 minutes. You have my word on that. But first I want to talk about the thing nobody's really talking about, and that's where we would be tonight if this event had gone slightly differently. If the cocktail of variables, including divine providence, if you're inclined to believe in such things, if it had been mixed just a little bit differently and the assassin's bullet had found its mark, our national life as we know it may have ended 23 hours ago. Change the bullet track just a little bit or the head position by half an inch, and millions of people would have watched Donald Trump's head explode on live television. It would have been a piece of footage in all likelihood that would make the Zapruder film look rather tame by comparison, and we would have some form of armed conflict taking place right now in multiple locations because let's call things what they are. If there is one singular event that has the potential to collapse our republic and render it totally non-functional, it would be the successful assassination of Donald Trump. And yesterday, that came closer to happening than a thing can be that doesn't actually come to pass. You want to talk about dodging a bullet? The man and the country have both done that, in the judgment of this reporter. And on a personal level, as just a run-of-the-mill American voter who would very much like Donald Trump to be my president for an additional 4 years, I say thank heaven the man is all right. And as a brief aside, if you have ever had the slightest inclination to send a super chat or a super thanks to this program, I want you to not do that. I want you to take whatever you were going to send, double it, and send it to the GoFundMe for the family of Corey Comparator. In fact, we better drop a link in the chat, and I think we'll drop a link in the description after the show is over. This man, as I understand it, when the shooting started, he didn't hesitate. He threw his wife and his daughter on the ground and exposed himself to hostile fire so that they wouldn't be hit. He had, at best, 2 or 3 seconds to react, and if I may presume to speak on behalf of all guys with wives and daughters, I think we would all hope in that same circumstance to display the same presence of mind and the same spirit of self-sacrifice and the same devotion to his loved ones and the same stone-cold bravery that Chief Comparator did on this day. Is he a murder victim? Yeah, he is. But he also died a hero. And let's never forget his name. As far as recriminations and remonstrances, well, we should probably begin with the idiot who did the shooting and the law enforcement professionals whose job it was to not let him do that. What we do know about the shooter, whose name we will not utter since this is a respectable program and we don't say the names of glory-seeking asshole murderers, well, he appears to be just about what you would expect, a young leftist radicalized by a virulently anti-Trump establishment. They tell us he's 20 years old, a local resident from a fairly ordinary neighborhood. All we know about his political activities and proclivities as we go to press is that he once made a $15 donation to a left-wing political action committee, and he registered as a Republican ahead of the 2022 midterms when he first became eligible to vote. That last thing has already given birth to all manner of wild conclusions and conspiratorial flights of fancy, but, as most things do, it probably has a fairly simple and mundane explanation. As we know, it's been part of the political strategery for quite a while now. Democrats and Republicans both do this. where they will register as members of the other party and then go vote in the primary for whoever they think is the candidate with the worst chance of winning the general election. So I think the most likely explanation here is that this kid registered Republican in 22 so that he could vote for Dr. Oz in the primary, whom the Democrats viewed as having the best chance to lose to a mute stroke victim, which John Fetterman was at that time. And hey, more power to him. They wound up being correct because the big, tall, Frankenstein-looking dude in the hoodie who couldn't speak English actually wound up winning the election. Now, who bears the ultimate and sole culpability when a maniac with a gun tries to whack somebody? That's right, it's the maniac. It ain't the gun, it ain't the bullet, it ain't video games, it ain't heavy metal music, it ain't Satanism. It's just the maniac who chose to pull the trigger and attempt to take the life of another. But can an environment be created and fostered and nurtured and promoted that makes a maniac more likely to pick up a gun and more likely to pull the trigger? Well, that's a big 10-4, good buddy. So just as a hypothetical thought experiment, suppose there was some political figure you didn't like and you spent years, nearly a decade, night and day blasting out the message that this person is the avatar of pure evil. This person is the enemy and the antithesis of all that is good and moral and praiseworthy. This person has to be stopped at all costs. We'll lose our whole way of life and everything we hold dear if some brave hero doesn't rise up and stop the bad, terrible, evil man. Do you suppose, if you spent years on end saying things like that and your side has a near monopoly on the public airwaves, that it might inspire some crazy person to go out and do that very self-same thing you have worked so hard to implicitly promote? And the people we used to call the press, they have the unmitigated gall to sit there in their ivory tower studios and inveigh against the temperature of the discourse and the fever of the vitriol and, Lord, the polarization, so much polarization, right? Because it's not as if you guys had anything to do with creating the world that you now say you lament living in, where some little douchebag actually took you at your word and went and did the thing you've been kinda really sorta wanting somebody to do for a fairly long time now. So yes, how very rich it is when the very same authors of the 9-year-long campaign of Donald Trump character assassination throw up their hands and start playing the sanctimonious game assigning blame to every party except themselves when shit starts getting real and it turns into actual assassination. I was watching a movie last week, a new movie. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Good picture, I do recommend it. But the point is, as I'm watching the climactic third act battle scene, as I'm watching our heroic protagonists slicing and dicing and shooting and smashing their way through hundreds of disposable Nazi foes, it occurs to me that the only context in which it is acceptable in the cinema of the third decade of the 21st century for human beings to visit wanton acts of violence upon other human beings is if the human beings having the violence visited on them are Nazis. If it's an action franchise or a superhero movie, your disposable adversaries have to be aliens or robots or what have you. They can't be people unless they are Nazis. Because Nazis are our convenient cultural shorthand that means pure evil, and Adolf Hitler is our convenient cultural shorthand when we need to boil the idea of pure evil down to a single real-world personage. So you tell me, when one of America's two major political parties and its entire mass media establishment and its entire academic establishment and its entire idiot celebrity class spends 9 years identifying the other party's leader and his supporters as literally Hitler and literally Nazis and saying these people are evil incarnate and an existential threat to our democracy and they have to be stopped at all costs, doesn't it stand to reason that some crazy person somewhere will believe them and be prepared to act on that belief? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, it does stand to reason, and the people who work tirelessly to create the current climate would do well to stop complaining about the existence of the thing they created and created on purpose. Now, like I said, I'm very glad indeed that President Trump remains alive and wasn't wounded more seriously than he was. But you know what doesn't make me glad? You know what kind of pisses me off, in fact? That we have to call this a failed assassination attempt instead of a thwarted assassination attempt, because according to the best information we currently have, the fact that Trump is currently alive owes nothing to the efforts of the Secret Service detail that he has been provided by Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas. In fact, all things being equal, this is probably the most shocking operational failure in Secret Service history. Worse than Dallas? Yes, worse than Dallas. You know why? Because we were supposed to have learned the lessons of Dallas 60 goddamn years ago. But Shazam, Shazam, here we are in the year 2024 with a left-wing radical taking pot shots at a president from an unsecured rooftop less than 150 yards away. You cannot even be serious right now, Secret Service. How has the head of that agency, Kimberly Cheadle, not resigned or been fired yet? You lost your man, Kimberly. I know he's still alive, but that is no thanks to you. Your man got hit in the head with an assassin's bullet. For Christ's sake, you have thus failed in your duties as badly as a person can fail at a thing. As a matter of basic decency and the barest professional decorum, you should have resigned before yesterday was out. We know, because it's a matter of public record, that the Trump campaign has made repeated requests for enhanced Secret Service protection since the start of this year, and the Biden administration has declined every single one of them without comment or justification. They have also refused any Secret Service protection for Bobby Kennedy Jr. If one didn't know better, one might suspect Joe Biden prefers it when his opponents get assassinated. But even with the resources the Trump detail does have, it seems like you could secure 3 goddamn rooftops without much difficulty. I mean, 150 yards, you have to be able to hit that shot 80% of the time in order to make the barest qualification as an infantryman. It is a kindergarten-level shot. And a dude with a rifle is able to mosey on up the side of a building, take his sweet-ass time getting himself in position, get his aim dialed in just right, and meanwhile, we've got all manner of videos coming out of people who saw the shooter on the rooftop. They were filming him, and they were frantically trying to get the attention of the cops and the Secret Service. He's got a gun, he's got a gun, he's on the roof, and he's got a gun. The guy who talked to the BBC reporter said he saw the shooter 5 minutes before the attack and couldn't get the attention of any law enforcement personnel. Now, where did the current head of the Secret Service work in her last job? Pepsi. And when she was hired to lead the Secret Service in 2022, what did she say her biggest priority was? Diversity and inclusion. We want the Secret Service to be 30% female in 10 years' time. And look, if we have to lose a few presidents in order to achieve that noblest of goals, well, hell, that's life, I guess. And I thought it was fun, as I'm sure you did too, when they're standing Trump back on his feet, forming a protective cocoon around him with their bodies, except, whoopsie, his entire head and upper torso remain fully exposed because the agent covering his front side is a 5'0" woman who weighs about 107 pounds. And there was that other female agent, as they were bundling Trump into the van, who kept sort of fumbling around trying to get her sidearm back into the holster like she had never handled a firearm before. Like a suburban housewife on her first trip to the shooting range. Just an outstanding look all around, Secret Service. You guys have covered yourselves in almost as much glory as the fake news media performance artists have. I mean, seriously, I want to know the answer. Which one of you was it who surveyed the scene at that rally site, saw those 3 rooftops providing an elevated shooting position at less than 150 yards and said, it's fine. I'm sure it'll be okay. What could happen? How much extra effort would it have required to put a dude on each one of those 3 rooftops? Couldn't you even farm that job out to the local cops? For Christ's sake, I'm sure they'd be happy to help. Nobody wants their little town to be the little town where Donald Trump got whacked. And how has Kimberly Cheadle not resigned or been fired? I'm serious here. Why is it that it's impossible to get fired in this administration unless you're a cross-dressing leather fetishist dog mask wearing luggage thief? Somebody please explain this to me. Oh, and last thing, Donald Trump, you, sir, are a stone-cold badass. The man's just been shot. He's wounded, bleeding. He's got no idea what's going on. But he knows he doesn't want to look like a pussy. Most men in his position, they wouldn't think about projecting an image of strength and resilience in that moment. Most men in his position would say, get me the hell off this stage. They're going to kill us all. But most men are not Donald J. Trump, are they? Donald J. Trump leaves a stage on his own time, on his own terms. And he's got the presence of mind to think, if I rise up bleeding from a gunshot wound and give the crowd and the photographers the image of a man who stands resolute and unconquered, his fist raised in the air, that will be an iconic image in American political history. And so it was, and so it will. And that's just about all I have got. God bless Donald J. Trump. Godspeed, Chief Corey Comparator. God bless the United States of America. And here's Mr. Sasquatch.